Hey, one more thing before you go. What do you do when you fall asleep while driving on a winding mountain road? And just before you have a head on collision with a semi truck, you hear someone call your name and wake you up. Do you believe the voice? Do you know who it is? Have you heard it again? We're going to answer these questions and more when we talk to a young lady who did just that. And it defined her life in so many ways. I'm your host, Michael Hurst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. Hey, my guest in this episode is Tanya Hackney. She's a live aboard sailor. We'll explain that. A homeschool mom of 5 and an author. Her current book, Leaving the Safe Harbor: The Risk and Rewards of Raising a Family on a Boat, is out this, well, it was out last year, I think, 2021. So a year old. Her husband and her family have had the power to turn their ideas into reality in order to encourage others to live their lives fully and never give up on their aspirations or their dreams. She's lived aboard, traveled, and written for the Take Two sailing blog for more than a decade, overcoming her fear to pursue a dream, faith in spirituality, and she's going to show you how you can do the same with an inspirational story. Welcome to the show, Tanya.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for having me and giving me an opportunity to share a little piece of our story.
You have an amazing journey, and I think that you live an amazing life. I think, give your children a very unique perspective of the world and how you do it. So, kudos for that. Thank you very much for. I'm a father. I appreciate that when you broaden your children's experiences in life to expand and learn other cultures firsthand, and you don't have to read it out of a book. So, thank you. Well done.
Thank you. It's a gift that keeps on giving. I mean,
It,
it was certainly a gift that we gave ourselves, but I'm realizing as we launch our teenagers that it was a gift that we gave them too. The travel is the best education.
it is. I think that.
Homeschooling aside, just the travel alone was good education.
Yeah, just a note that when my kids were in, um, would be, well, here, I get a little confused. Arizona or Colorado, you have 1 through 6 is elementary, 7th, 8th, and ninth is junior high, 10th, 11th, 12th is high school. You come down here to Arizona, and it's elementary school all the way up through 8th grade, and then you're in high school. There is no junior high. But before we left Colorado, my oldest, when she was graduating 8th grade and going into ninth grade, they had a trip that they did. The history teacher and one of the other teachers within the arena, they took the kids to Greece and to Italy and Germany. It was great. It was an
Wow.
all-encompassing little trip that allowed these kids to kind of celebrate moving into high school, give them an exploration of the world. And um, my oldest daughter loved every aspect of that. She came back and said that was the best experience that I think I've ever had. At that time, of course, she was only
Yeah,
ninth
that's a
grade.
hell of a field trip. I never went on any field trips that cool.
No, 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 no. It was great, but then we moved down to Arizona, and my youngest didn't get to experience that because down in
Oh,
here they didn't have anything like that. But she has since then. We've encouraged her to take trips and to go places and do things. So yeah, I think it does. It broadens your ability to communicate with the world, I think.
yeah, I think even more than that, it gives you a sense that you are not identified by the country that you're from or
Yeah,
the color of your skin or the language that you speak. You are very quickly you realize that you are part of one human family, and it's transformative. It was transformative for all of us.
I agree with that. We're all connected. Well, speaking of connected, I like to start at the beginning. Can we unfold your life story?
Yeah, let's do it.
Um, where'd you grow up?
So I was born in Colorado, and my dad traveled a lot for work. I moved away from Colorado when I was about 8. I think it must have been second grade. We moved to Texas, and my dad continued to work and travel. He was in urethane foam construction. He traveled all over the world, and he also did local construction and things like that. Um, my parents' marriage was a little bit tumultuous. I wouldn't say that it was kind of dysfunctional, growing up, but there were lots of wonderful gifts that my parents gave me, and one of those gifts was road trips. And my dad loves to travel. He's a world traveler, and he wanted to make sure that even if we didn't have a lot of money, that we still got to, get out of Dodge. So we traveled all over the United States, camped, and just saw the national parks and big cities, did lots and lots of road trips.
That's
And
a
I'm really,
positive.
really grateful for that.
Yeah, that's a very positive thing. Do you have any brothers or sisters that went with
I
you or by
have
yourself?
a younger brother and a younger sister, and we are friends to this day, which is kind of a miracle.
Having an older sister and younger brother, I agree. Sometimes that the dynamic is, well, a little strained. Sometimes it works really well.
Yeah,
Um,
at the time when you're fighting in the back seat, there's a lot of hatred for siblings, but when you're adults, those are the things that you laugh about.
they
I'm
kind of go
really
away.
hoping that someday our kids are gonna laugh about the boat passages that we took, the way that I laugh about our road trip memories.
Well, there you go. From what I've read so far, I think they would. What'd you want to be when you grew up? Did you go to university?
I did. I always wanted to be a teacher. I'm a person who had a list probably from the time that I was 5 and knew exactly what I wanted and pursued everything relentlessly. I went to Middlebury College in Vermont. I majored in English because I love to write, and I minored in French because I wanted to live in Paris. And I did a second minor in early childhood education because I wanted to teach kindergarten. And I did all of the things that I wanted to do. I taught elementary school in Atlanta. I taught English as a second language, and I did spend a semester in Paris while I was at Middlebury. And the language lessons have served me really, really well. I also learned Spanish, and that those two languages have helped a lot, especially with our travels in the Caribbean. So
I would think so. Yeah,
I
I think.
loved my job. I taught in Atlanta public schools, and thought I would do it forever. And then when my husband and I, we're high school sweethearts, decided to have kids, I shifted to homeschooling. And that's been like a second career.
What grade level did you teach, or did I miss that?
No, that's okay. I taught kindergarten and I
Taught
loved it.
kindergarten. Well, that would make you a great homeschool teacher right off the bat because you relate well to kids anyway, and you would relate more to your own children.
You would think so. You would think that being a teacher would be the best training for being a homeschool mom. It's actually really difficult to make that transition because
Oh,
homeschooling isn't just school at home. It's very relational, and of course if you've ever tried to help your kids with homework, you know that it's not always easy to be your kid's teacher. So I had to unlearn a lot of the things that I learned teaching in the classroom. I guess the main benefit of being a teacher is that I got to practice on all those other people's children and make a lot of mistakes before I had my own. So that was definitely beneficial.
I would think so. Yeah. Did you teach your kids a language?
They grew up hearing some French and some Spanish. Unfortunately, this is the thing, like, when you're homeschooling, your kids don't always want the gifts that you have to give. It wasn't until we started traveling that they really felt motivated to learn.
To learn some.
Otherwise you're just cracking the whip. So,
Well, I took 4 years of French. I probably
mhm,
remembered 10 words. It's one of those things I understand. It's kind of, I know that my wife and I are trying to get back into French because we want to travel there ourselves. Here, we were going to do it 2 years ago, 2020, actually. We had planned to go to France for our anniversary, and COVID kind of put a kibosh on that. So it's been delayed. And unfortunately, we put the book back down. So I'm back down to the 10 words.
well, it's amazing. I think your brain has it stored somewhere, and if you're surrounded with it, it'll come back.
Might pop it back in there. We hope. We hope. You have a very, very unique story in regard to. Well, you met. Well, let me back this up. I'm sorry. So you married your high school sweetheart, and you just celebrated your silver anniversary.
We
Um,
did.
so congratulations on that. Kudos for that as well, because in this day and age, it's very difficult for people to stay together that long. Actually, so another well done. So you've got a lot. You've got a lot to share our audience, because you have accomplished many things in life that you can pass on that wisdom. Uh,
It's funny because I think we define success differently in our lives, and I think if you had asked me 25 or 30 years ago how I defined success, it is very, very different than how I define it now. And I appreciate that you saying that staying married is an accomplishment and homeschooling your kids is an accomplishment, because they aren't necessarily things that are celebrated out loud sometimes in our
mm,
culture. And so it's it's good to remember that even though I don't really make money because I have chosen to stay at home with my kids, sometimes if we tie up our worth in our, in our income or in our billable hours, then by that valuation, I'm not worth very much. But if you count it by love and energy, then, I'm extremely wealthy.
love and health make wealth.
Hmm.
Love and health make wealth. Let's back up just a little bit, if you don't mind.
I
You
don't
had an
mind.
incident when you were around 20 years old, driving down a mountain road. I've driven down many mountain roads in Colorado. I don't know where this was that you had done, but I know winding roads can be very um, mesmerizing, and you fell asleep. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, I sometimes shorten the story for the sake of storytelling, but I'll give you the whole skinny. It was right around finals time. I went to Middlebury College in Vermont, and so I had a car there, and I was often asked to take people to the airport. So it was just after finals, winter break was coming up. A friend of mine needed a ride to the airport. Her flight left really early, like 7 in the morning, which would mean leaving Middlebury around 5 and driving up to Burlington, Vermont. And I have a propensity for falling asleep in the car. Certainly around finals, we had all been up late studying, and I knew it was kind of dangerous to go alone. So I brought a friend with me to kind of prevent any accident. And so on the way up, I was fine. We dropped off my friend. On the way back, I started to get sleepy. About halfway back to Middlebury, I pulled the car over. I asked my friend Annie to drive. And so we switched places and then continued on our way. And I fell asleep in the passenger seat. So the story is actually even more amazing than if God had called me from the driver's seat. I was actually asleep in the passenger seat. My friend Annie was coming around a curve. So, tiny mountain road, it's mountain on one side, drop off on the other side, semi truck coming around that curve. Uh, all I heard from my perspective, all I heard was, Tanya, wake up. And then I snapped to attention. I saw that we were in the wrong lane. I shouted Annie's name. She pulled the car right back into our lane. And then around the next, scenic overlook, she just pulled over. And we were both, laughing and crying and breathing fast and having a little bit of an adrenaline rush, trying to debrief. And I just said, thank God you called my name. And Annie looks at me and she's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I fell asleep. I didn't call your name. I was going to get us in a horrible accident. And I got really quiet and I thought, well, who woke me up? So I was at a really critical point in my spiritual journey then, because I had been raised in a kind of a weird, very religious household. More not the household wasn't religious, it was the church that we went to. And I had kind of rejected religion. I was really searching for what was real and what was true. And college is a great time to do that. But I was throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Sometimes we reject religion and God gets kind of tossed out the window. And I've come to realize that I can have a relationship with God and have disorganized religion, which I much prefer to organized religion. So that was a really amazing moment, because I was at the point of like, well, maybe God is not real. Maybe the Bible is an edited book. Maybe human beings have this need for religion, but maybe we've made it all up. And at the point that he called my name, I then could no longer say, this is not real. Something is real. Someone is there, and someone who intervened. I mean, lots
Mhm.
of us maybe believe that there's something out there, or that we're not here by accident, or, that God set creation in, in motion and then leaves us here. And I couldn't say any of those things. Someone was there and someone called my name, and I had a reason to be here. And I didn't want to waste my life. I felt like that it has a meaning and purpose, and it really, really changed the way that I approach life.
Well, I mean, it's. I think we call it well, I would call it kind of an awakening. I grew up in a very strict Catholic environment. My mother was extreme Catholic, and I am now a Reformed Catholic. I don't necessarily believe in organized religion, and although I've tried
I've heard
everything,
people say recovering Catholic.
or I'm going to have to borrow that one.
Uh,
I'm a recovering cat. I like that one better.
yes,
Not reformed, recovering. It wasn't even a 12, well, kind of a 12-step program. Um,
kind of.
but yeah, my mother, I found them, and this might be off the subject a little bit, but still kind of pertaining to our conversation. It's interesting because my parents got divorced when I was very young, like 8 or 9 years old, and yeah, my mother was very Catholic, and the church kind of excommunicated her for getting a divorce, and then couldn't take communion, and us kids couldn't either, and the kids couldn't come into church with her, and this kind of thing. I found that to be very hypocritical, even at that age. I was 9 or 10 years old, and I thought
Yeah, that's sad.
that's very hypocritical, and that's not what a church is supposed to do. You're supposed to have a community there that you can rely on, and life happens. Some people get divorced
Yeah.
because they can't live together. And, it kind of turned my eye to seeking different things. And then my mother took us to every other Presbyterian, Baptist, Southern Baptist, Nazarene, everything except for a Mormon, because you really couldn't step foot in a Mormon church unless you were actually Mormon. But she tried everything else. And the thing that I found, and the commonality that I found within that, is every one of them had a different Bible. Southern
Hmm.
Baptist has a different Bible. I mean, it's the same Bible theoretically, but there are things that are in the Bible that were removed or fit within that particular religion.
Right.
It was very
Right. The
interesting.
idea that there's this eternal word of God, but that you have some control over what you make it say, I guess.
Yeah. It to me, um, I'm a very spiritual individual. I believe in God. I believe in angels, and but I don't go to church, and I believe I don't have to go to church to talk to God. I can talk to him anytime I want. Um,
I'd agree with that, and he can talk to you too.
exactly, like he did for you, luckily.
Yeah, for sure.
Because obviously, if the outcome, but I was a traffic investigator and I worked a mountain pass, and coming
Mm,
down something like that, the sidewall on one side and the creek bed and 300-400 feet on the second side,
mhm,
there's not a good outcome
mm-mm.
on that typically. So from that perspective, obviously, there was a bigger plan for you, which I'm sure that you're very, very grateful that you got put on that plan, because you look at you're married, you have kids, you have 5 kids, you've traveled the world with your husband and created a wonderful life, and you inspire, motivate, and educate people with your writings and your blog that you've been doing for such a long time. So yeah, it's cool. I love it when
It is cool.
you get those things whispered in your ear or yelled at you, one of the two.
Yeah, thank God. Thank God. I mean, for me, I guess I'm stubborn or deaf or something. Frequently, if I hear that voice, it's loud, it's clear, it's not coming from inside me. It sounds very different than my sort of anxious inner monologue. It's a it's an unmistakable voice. I wouldn't say that it's coming in through my ears, but it comes in the form of a voice and in words. I mean, I guess I would be shocked. Annie didn't hear the voice, so it was loud enough.
Well,
But
exactly.
if it was an audible voice, it certainly was spoken directly to me, and I've heard it a few times, and it's usually at some pivotal moment when I really needed direction.
Let's talk about those. Do you mind talking about those,
No, I
sharing
don't
some
mind
of
talking
those
about it at all. I
pivotal
love talking
moments?
about it.
Let's talk about some pivotal moments. Whoops. Wait a minute. I can cut that out. Let's go here.
Sure. So I guess it would be helpful to give a little timeline because I can say at what points, God kind of intervened. My husband and I were high school sweethearts. We dated long distance in college, and then after college, we got back together again and decided to get married. And we got married and then had a couple of kids, and we were yuppies in Atlanta. And there have been a couple of times in that early period where I heard God's voice. One time I was going for a long walk just around our neighborhood, and I witnessed a car accident. And just kind of up ahead of me, and I saw a woman get out of the car and kind of sit on the edge of the sidewalk, and I heard a voice saying, "Go sit down with that woman and pray with her." And it was so uncomfortable. I didn't actually want to do that. I know that that seems like a kind, compassionate thing that you could do for someone who had been in an accident, but I was still afraid that she was going to think that I was some religious nut, or that just I thought that it was going to be super awkward, or what if she rejected me? We have all these objections when God speaks to us. I think sometimes we turn a deaf ear because we think that idea is ridiculous. I reject it. But having grown accustomed to that voice, I did what it said, even though it was uncomfortable. And I sat down on the sidewalk next to her and prayed with her. And there have been other times like that where I get some like weird assignment. There have been a couple of times where I didn't want to do it and I chose not to. One time I was in an airplane, and the whole time I was sitting next to this girl, my heart was like on fire. God was saying, like, just speak to her. And I'm arguing, inside my own head. I'm like, well, she's clearly reading her book. She doesn't want the chatty Cathy next to her. And he insistently said, really, you really need to talk to her. And about 30 minutes before the plane landed, she put down her magazine and I saw an opening. And then in the next 30 minutes, she pours out this life story. This happens to me all the time where I must have I don't know, vulnerable
A
written on my
beacon.
face or something. People are always telling me these stories. She tells me her life story, and I'm, sitting in the airplane seat crying. And then the sign comes on, fasten your seatbelts. We're getting ready to land. And I realize, okay, I have 10 minutes to speak some word to this poor soul. But we'd had 2 hours. If I had just, broken the ice 2 hours before, we would have had that time where I could have just, shown her a little love and compassion. And I got off the airplane and I was crying. I just cried buckets. I'm crying just thinking about it, that I had the opportunity. I was given an assignment. It was like a privilege to do this thing. And I had said, no, I don't really feel like it today. I'm sure that God can speak to her in other ways. He didn't need me to do that assignment, but I had the opportunity to do it and I chose not to. And I also lost the blessing. So I guess knowing what that feels like when I say no or when I ignore it, I just don't ignore that voice. If I think of somebody and they come to mind 2 or 3 times, I call them because I assume that somewhere across time and space, they need me or they're struggling with something. And I'll call someone up and they'll out of the blue and they'll say, "I don't know how you knew to call me. I'm having this major catastrophe." And then I have the chance to pray with them on the phone or whatever. I guess I've gotten to where I listen closely and I expect God to speak to me. And I don't really expect it to be comfortable because lots and lots of times he's spoken and it was not comfortable. When my husband and I decided that we wanted to go sailing and rejected the American dream and the yuppie lifestyle, which is a whole long story. I don't know how much of that story you want. But when we had decided to do that and we had begun to look at boats, we went and looked at this old, bad smelling, needed a lot of work kind of boat. I stepped down into the companionway, when the smell of must and diesel fuel kind of wafts up in your face. I heard that voice again and it said, "Take a look at your future." And I'm looking at this old boat and I'm like, "Oh, no, no, no. No, no, I do not want to live like this. This is not my idea of an adventure. Like, I do not want this old boat." Um, and I realized looking back on it, it was kind of a heads up. It wasn't necessarily you two are supposed to buy this boat and sail away in it. It was more a heads up and prepare yourself because this dream that you have, it's going to happen. Might not happen in the way that you thought, or it might not happen in the timeline that you thought, but someday you are going to find yourself, standing in the galley of a boat. and that did come to pass. It took a while, like 15 years roughly from when we got married to when we sailed away.
That's in itself is an amazing journey. What can I ask? What motivated you guys towards sailing in a boat? Because obviously, growing up and being born in Colorado, and then when you move to college, it's kind of a mountainous area down there too, isn't it?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I love the mountains, but it wasn't until we moved to Florida when I was about 12 that I realized that I'm a water person at heart. I love the ocean. I don't think I could ever live very far from a big body of water. I find it can be both thrilling and peaceful depending on the sea state, but I can't live far from the water. I really, really love it. The ocean is a kindred spirit.
I think we all have a connection to the ocean in some form or another. My wife loves the ocean. She was born in California. She grew up
Mhm.
in Estes Park, Colorado, but um, and of course we lived there when we got married. But she loves the water, and I finally, during our last anniversary here, celebrating the kids and our anniversary, excuse me, the kids' birthdays and our anniversary, I bought a whale watching trip, and I convinced her to come on a
Wonderful.
boat, and she kind of got on there and went, "Well, this isn't that bad."
Yeah.
She was going, "I really like this," and yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, the thing that we did probably wouldn't appeal to everyone. You have to have a few things. You have to be very determined and indomitable, and you have to really love the water, and you have to have a sense of adventure. I mean, a lot of people do what we do. They just do it, maybe in a land yacht. So we meet a lot of kindred spirits who
Right.
are RV nomads or backpackers, or I guess the new thing is world schooling. So families who save a bunch of money and then travel somewhere and live somewhere in another country for a while, and kind of travel the world that way. So there's lots and lots of ways to do what we did. My husband was sanding the bottom of his dad's boat the summer that we fell in love. We were 17, and he was a sailor, and he used to race sailboats on the weekends, and so sailing
Oh,
was a part of his life, and he had grown up sailing, and we became very close with his family, and his dad and stepmom still own a boat, and we meet them places. uh, in 2020 for Thanksgiving, we met in Charlotte Harbor, and we rafted the two boats together, and we had Thanksgiving, a floating Thanksgiving, and we've done that a
very
few
cool.
times with them in the past. So it's a dream that we all share. When we were newlyweds, we took a trip with them, and as always happens on a boat, it's both magical and terrible. There were storms at sea, and then there were gorgeous starlit nights and phosphorescence in the water. We had kind of the full gamut. And we had sailed from Naples to the Dry Tortugas National Park and Key West and back. And on the way back, something broke. I bear a little bit of responsibility. I may or may not have broken something, and then they couldn't get the engine back in gear. And we ended up having this amazing night sail back to Naples, and it was just very calm seas. I think if it had been a stormy night, my whole life might be a different picture. But it was a beautiful night, and I got the sailing bug, and I kind of just sat up all night long with Jay's dad, and I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to do this. And so, you know,
Very
when
cool.
when we got tired of the American dream because it was unfulfilling and unsatisfying, we were successful in the way that many people measure success, but we were bored. And the rest of our lives, it looked like it was just going to be work harder, make more money, get a bigger house, get more cars. It was, and then maybe you get to travel before you die. And that formula looked really awful to us. So we said, let's travel while we're young, and let's take our kids on an adventure. And this was a way to take kids on an adventure that appealed to my husband. And quite frankly, once we had a big family, I can't even imagine what travel would have cost if we'd tried to fly or rent houses in all the places that we've been. So
Yep.
having your house on your back really makes sense. So we know big families that do RVs and things like that. But we loved the water, so we chose a water adventure.
Personally, I think I would have more gone towards your path than I love traveling. I've visited a whole bunch of the states, but I've been to London, been to Mexico and Hawaii and blah blah blah. But doing it the way you're doing it, I think I can never be. an RV nomad. I've interviewed a couple people that they call themselves van nomads.
Mhm.
I could not do that, I don't believe. But something like what you did, I think that would be like a fantastic opportunity. To me, it would be better. But at the same time, like I said, I've been out on the ocean, and I do understand what you're saying. You can look up and see. You don't understand the immense amount of universe until you're out in an area where you can look up and see that universe.
That's a that's a really magical part of our lives. It's very, very special when you're out in the middle of the ocean and you can't see land, and you feel so small. I mean, you know that you are just a speck on a speck on a speck in the universe. But at the same time, you also feel so seen, and I don't know if that's because I have a sense of God's presence already or if I would have gained that from being out on the water, but I had this sense that despite the fact that I am a speck on a speck on a speck, he can see me and he cares about me. And we had a really, really rough night at sea, and I mean, I don't know that I've ever been so miserable, and wanted off the boat. I wanted off the ride. You know, imagine a roller coaster that doesn't end for 8 days. And it was just a rough night, and I didn't get enough sleep the night before because 'cause we're on watch all the time. You know, my husband and I tag teaming. One of us is on duty with the kids, one of us is on duty with the boat. You're watching the sails, you're watching the wind, you're watching for other ships, you're trying to make sure you don't run into anything, and the weather's rough, and so you go from, longer watches to short watches, and I'm just sitting at the helm station crying. I'm never a mess when we're sailing. Normally, I'm really happy, but I was so tired and stressed out and physically uncomfortable because of the motion of the boat and afraid, really so afraid sometimes out on the ocean. And I was crying, and my husband came up for his watch and he's like, "What is wrong?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just want off the boat, and the only way to get off is to go swimming." Like, I'm not suicidal, so I wasn't going to jump off the boat, but it was just so awful. I felt so trapped. And he was like, "Go find a quiet corner to curl up in. I'll take the boat and don't worry about me." And I curled up in a little corner, and it was so hard to get comfortable. Your body is being moved around on the boat, and the boat is actually fine. We were not in any danger. It was, mostly psychological stress. And I find this quiet corner and I wedge myself in there and I squeeze my eyes shut. And of course, you can't sleep. You'll be sitting on watch, looking at the horizon every 10 minutes, and you're nodding off. And then the minute that you're off watch, you're wide awake and you can't sleep.
That's the way it
So I'm
always
curled up in
happens.
this yes, of course. So I'm all curled up in this corner like a little baby crying in curled up in a little ball, and I hear this voice that I recognize at this point in my life, and it just says very simply, "Look up." And I'm like, "What do you mean look up?" I'm always arguing, right? Like, "What do you mean look up? Why do why do I even listen to you?" And I open my eyes, I peek over my shoulder, and there's dark storm clouds all around us, and the waves are pushing us in every direction, and it's very windy, and we're moving really fast, and then in the clouds I see this tiny tiny window where the clouds have parted, and there is just like, I don't know, a tiny window of stars in between these clouds. And I get this sense immediately of like calm, completely calm. I stop freaking out. I can feel that my heart rate is coming down. I'm breathing again. And I start to realize, okay, somewhere outside of my little unpleasant circumstance, the entire universe is going on like clockwork. It's it's fine. I'm going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine, and I could stop freaking out now. And then I fell asleep. And this is the way that I say, I'm looking at the stars and I realize that I'm nothing. I'm less than nothing. And and yet I'm everything because somebody loves me. It's it's amazing. I can't talk about it without crying.
It's very profound when you have an opportunity to experience that. And I think that, especially being out there, the ocean is, as you know, but for our listeners who have never been out on the ocean, it is a huge, huge. It's almost unexplainable when you're out there. And if you look at it from the
Yeah,
sky and you're above it and you can see and look down there, you're a little tiny boat in the middle of that
tiny.
mass, and it can be overwhelming. It can be, and you can be on a naval ship and it would feel the same way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, it really doesn't
That's why I
matter.
say speck on a speck on a speck. I'm just one tiny person on one tiny boat in one tiny patch of the ocean,
Yep.
really on a tiny marble floating in space in a tiny galaxy. And the more you telescope out, the smaller you are. I mean, it goes both directions though, right? Like one
Yeah.
time we were sailing across the Gulf Stream and it was a really nice, calm day. And so every opportunity is an opportunity to homeschool. Doesn't really matter what you're doing, everything's a learning opportunity. So we grab a net and we scoop up some sargasso weed and dump it into this little tank that we had, this little plexiglass tank for collecting critters and observing things. We scoop this bunch of sargasso into the tank and give it a little shake, and you can start to see little critters coming out of the sargasso weed, and they're all perfectly camouflaged. There's a tiny seahorse. There's a little crab that lives in this one floating mat of sargasso. Each sargasso bubble that it keeps the seaweed afloat, we looked at it under the microscope. Each tiny bubble of this weed has a tiny crustacean curled up on it, like encrusted. And, we look at algae under the microscope. Sometimes we see algae and we look under the microscope and you're looking suddenly at this forest. And in between the trees are these birds that are flying, and it's some kind of paramecium or something alive inside something that you're looking
Wow.
infinitesimal. I mean, so you're telescoping and you're microscoping and you realize, I guess we're somewhere in the middle because
Somewhere in
I'm
the,
infinitely small and infinitely large. It definitely cooks your noodle.
what a it's a, I can feel that inside. What an amazing opportunity that you're giving your children. It is something that not everybody gets the opportunity to experience, especially from that perspective in life, in understanding life, and that life starts very, very, very small in some cases, as well as us and larger. And it how it all still interconnects, and without each one of those little pieces, each one of those little minute, all the way up to the masses, it changes the dynamic if they're not there.
Yeah, and I know not all sailors are believers that there's a God or that there's a creator, but I have to tell you that when you see this kind of order in the universe and the kind of beauty and design, it
Hmm.
makes it really hard for me to believe that everything is an accident. It actually, for me, I think it would take more faith to believe that everything is an accident than to believe that someone amazingly intelligent created what we see. And
Oh,
I'm not
absolutely.
going to define for anyone how he
Yeah.
did it. I have no idea. I wasn't there, but there's just no way that I can. I mean, the things that we've seen and the places that we've been, that if you told me it was an accident, I pretty much would just laugh at you.
Yeah.
I mean, someone can laugh at me and say that I'm delusional, but I have a really lovely delusion, and it makes me very happy. And I'll take it any day over believing that everything is an accident and that nothing has meaning, and the nihilism that kind of leads to.
I Native Americans have it. I used to have I still do have a lot of Native American friends that are from generations of Native Americans. And, the one thing that I learned from them was that Mother Nature, everything that's around us, the minute little thing, the crustaceans on the algae that you guys picked up, and the seaweed that you guys looked at, and all the stuff that were taking place in there, all the way up to the largest mammal, well, the whale in the ocean or an elephant on land, we're all connected and we're all part of this
Well, there's a sense
wonderful
that the Earth
universe.
itself, in the way that we are like a planet. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right.
Get so excited. We are ourselves like a planet. By genetic material, we are only about 10% human, 10% or less. 90% of the human body is by genetic material is something else. I mean, microbes, millions and millions of microbes. So, in the same way that we are a planet unto ourselves, our planet itself may very well be a living organism, and we just don't really understand how it works. I mean, I think there's a lot of scientific arrogance that happens, and I prefer humility. I prefer the posture of saying, we just don't know.
Well, I know Mother Nature's a little upset. I I do know that she's very upset lately because of the way we're treating her. So, um,
It's hard to see the plastic in the ocean. I think that was something I wasn't really prepared for, was how much trash we create. Interestingly, I think the countries that actually have more wealth and create the trash do a better job of caring about it. And then the countries that are really where people are living hand to mouth don't have uh, the the wealth or the means to control their anything beyond their daily existence, do a much worse job of controlling climate change. And so it's a tricky hard question about what to do and how to fix it or not fix it, or but it is hard to watch. It's hard to see,
Yeah,
the detritus of our civilization washed up on a oceanside beach in the Bahamas, for example. It's shocking. I think it does lead to behavior change, and not everyone can see that perspective the way that we have it. But if they could, a lot of people would really want something different.
make better choices. I
Yeah.
agree with that. It's very, it makes me really, really sad. It touches me deep down inside when I see things like that. It just, I've been an individual that has been on the side of climate, taking care of environmentalist, I guess. In fact, I was part of the first environmental film festival. I'm going to give away part of my age now. 40, about 40 years ago. It's the first time
Yeah.
I ever met Ed Bigley Jr. He was the one that was ahead of it at the time, and they did a documentary, then a film festival in regard to the environment, and it really opened my eyes up at that time too, because they had not the same kind of technology ability that they have now to be able to show more in depth of what's taking place. And at that time, they didn't have, you can video much easier than you can now. And some of these areas that they were at, they had to haul in camera equipment and, you know, things like that to get it documented. But yeah, it really put me on a different path.
Well,
Um,
you cannot protect what you do not love, and you cannot love where you do not spend time. And so if
yeah,
you spend time outside, you spend time, and if you live close to nature, then you care about it. You care
yeah,
about it more.
it's like a family.
And it
It,
changes your behavior. And actually, you know, a lot of environmentalism is talk and not a lot of action. And action meaning every individual human being,
yeah,
and governments holding businesses
accountable.
holding them accountable.
Yeah.
It's a big problem. It's not our only problem, but it's a big problem.
It is not. I'm going to have a conversation with an individual that deals with climate change and environmentalism here in the next 6 weeks. So I'm hoping that it will
Excellent. Well, we should
open.
leave that one to the experts.
I'm sorry.
I said we should leave that one to the experts.
Yeah, she is, and I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have. Um, so, well, there's a prelude to another, and we'll call it a teaser for something coming up. Uh,
That's right.
what's it like living outside the box? I mean, what do you, if I may delve into your travels and your living? Um, uh, and again, this is digital, so if we can cut something out of that if we need to. Like, what do you guys do for a living? I mean, you don't make a normal living, like you said. You've quit your jobs and you've taken to this boat and you've traveled, like from I would assume from the United States all the way over to Europe, in that sailboat. What do you guys do for a living? What do you do from that perspective?
So, our unconventional lifestyle actually started before we moved out of the box. We found a book when we were a young couple. Somebody must have given it to us. It was Larry Burkett's Complete Financial Guide for Young Couples. And we were deeply in debt when we got married. We had school debt and car debt and consumer debt and every kind of debt you can imagine. I think probably $50,000 or more in debt. And we were 22. So we faced this monumental task of trying to get ourselves out from under this mountain of debt. And this book really helped us figure out how to do that. And I think we ultimately came up with the idea that we would need, if we wanted to go on an adventure, if we didn't want to be strapped to jobs that we didn't love or a lifestyle that didn't excite us, that we were going to need to get out of debt and to live debt free. And so we started that project as 22-year-olds, and we lived in a dumpy little apartment in Atlanta, and we worked really hard both of us. I was a school teacher. My husband was, I think at the time, a computer programmer. I guess that would have been his job description. He was a computer guy, self-taught, college dropout. Did not need the piece of paper that college offered, but had all the skills that he needed to make a good living. And so we paid off the school debt. Some of it was forgiven. My part of my debt was forgiven because I taught in a very low income area in Atlanta, and some of my federal debt got erased in the years that I taught. We paid off cars, we paid off credit cards, we paid back family. We did everything we could to get out from under the debt. And we viewed basically a mortgage as the only acceptable kind of debt because it can also be an investment. And so by the time that we bought our house, that was all we had was a mortgage. And we lived pretty pretty sparsely up until we bought that house. And then after that we just chose means. And when I quit my teaching job, my husband was able to go out on his own and run his own consulting business. Sometimes he had an employer and sometimes he had clients. It just depended. And that allowed us to have the life that we wanted even while we were living in the house. And so when it came time to leave Yuppieville, as I call it
Yuppieville.
lovingly,
I like that.
suburbia, the house with the white picket fence, we drove away from that, off on an adventure, but we were already starting with the mindset of freedom. And being in debt is definitely a kind of slavery. So we had set ourselves free in that way. And then once you start prying yourself outside the box, it gets easier and easier. So we didn't have any debt. We didn't have brick and mortar jobs. We kind of stopped going to church. We had been in church. There are things we love about church and there are things we hate about church. But obviously on a boat that gets complicated where we do kind of I like to call it the International Church of Pancakes. We do Sunday morning family reading, Bible reading, and discussion over pancakes. And that has kind of been our mainstay. We find lots of people who are believers, and we have churches about people and not about a building. So that's another way that we pride ourselves out of the box.
That's probably the only church I go to now.
The International Church of Pancakes?
Absolutely.
Yes, it's a good church. I have to say it's a good church. And then homeschooling was a natural thing because I can't imagine any school that would have put up with our schedule. The year that we bought the boat, we had a 7, 6, 4, and 2-year-old, and we were spending 3 days on the boat and 4 days at home. And my oldest would have been in first grade, and he was learning to read. And no school would have let me just drop him off for 3 days a week. So homeschooling was kind of part and parcel with the life that we chose. So, right? So what are the boxes? There's no debt, there's no house, there's no job, there's no church. We kept our cars, but we parked them at friends' houses. And if we needed a vehicle, we had a vehicle. We have a few things left in storage, but we sold most of our stuff. It's been really good. It's been good. My husband actually has been able to continue working. So it's not true that we didn't, that we stopped working and we are on vacation all the time. Actually, a life on vacation all the time would be very unsatisfying.
Right.
We've both discovered that we like working. I like teaching the kids. I like baking things from scratch. I like making handmade books. I like learning musical instruments and new languages. Like, you need to always have some kind of pursuit to give your life a sense of purpose and direction. And my husband really likes to work. And so he prefers to work for himself. And so he's a self-made man, and he has his own business, and he is a computer consultant and a database consultant. And he's been able to provide for the family and keep paying to fix this old wooden boat for the last 15 years. And that's what's kept the whole operation afloat. But it really does take both of us because while one of us is, working, the other one is also working, but at different purposes. So I kind of have managed the sphere of home management and child rearing while he has continued to fix the boat and make money to fix the boat.
Well, so realistically, when you had that little voice whisper in your ear about this is going to be your life, look to the future, it has presented itself as a very very positive option for you and your family.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we had to overcome a lot of things in order to do this. Like, I'm able to talk to you about it in the past tense. We did it. I feel successful. I can make it sound like it was easy, but I have to tell you, it was damn near impossible. Like, so many obstacles.
It
Fear
would be
being
difficult.
probably the biggest one. Fear is one of those things that you really have to overcome. And I guess I would say being scared to death, literally, like if you have had a brush with your own mortality and you faced the ultimate fear that is, all the other fears are kind of hidden inside that one big fear, the fear of the loss of your own life or the loss of
Yep.
someone that you love. If you have faced that fear, it makes all the other ones easier. And it also makes you not waste time because you realize that life is fragile. It could end at any moment. So you had better do something with it right now. And so I think it made us less likely to waste the time that we had. People put things off. A lot of people, we meet a lot of
Hmm.
retired people sailing because they raised their kids and they did the traditional thing and then they go sailing. But we also met people, I mean, we've benefited from the, we call them the dead guys. It's not a very nice way to put it, but we're very thankful to the dead guys. We've, you know, been sold things from by widows who are doing estate sales when their husband has have passed away. He had this dinghy that he always wanted to go fishing in, but then he had this heart attack and now she's selling it cheap and she was happy to sell it to us because we were going to be out there using it and doing what its intended purpose was. And we see that and we're like, "Oh, that is so sad. It's so sad that you had this dream and that you never got to do it." And so I guess it
We are living the
being
dream for them.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and there, nothing is wasted. Ultimately, in that way that we're all connected, nothing is wasted. No pain is wasted. No loss is wasted. It can be recycled. But
Yeah.
it definitely made us live a more vibrant life. That sort of awareness of our own fragility, and it
I,
made us overcome our fears because it's
right.
really scary to live counterculture. It's scary to do things that no one else is doing. I mean, if we found people that were doing it, and we could kind of get advice and model our lives after theirs. But and now we hope that we would be in that position that we would say to other people, hey, if you're unhappy, you don't have to stay there. You don't have to keep doing this thing that you're doing. If it
And
makes you happy, fine, stay in suburbia forever. But if it doesn't, you don't have to do that.
I think COVID had its benefits and had its disadvantages. One of the benefits that it had, I think, that it really allowed a mass amount of individuals that realized that they didn't need to be in that grind. They had like
Hmm.
2 or 3 million people here that decided to I'm not going to play your game anymore. I'm tired of the 9 to 5 working for
Hmm.
you, punching a clock, wasting my life. I realized how much I didn't need to be there because, like, my wife worked, well, she works full time, and she works for the court system down here in Arizona. And for 2.5 years, she got to work from home during the whole thing because they basically shut everything down and they sent people home. And she worked from home. She works part of the educational system for. And I'm sure you understand this from a teacher perspective, but every year the judges and the probation officers and everybody that works in the court system has to be recertified with so much education, continuing education, new laws change, new updates, blah blah blah, new procedures go into place, etc. Well, she's part of the group that teaches them. So from that perspective, they were able to do it from home, and it reset our lifestyle back to what we thought it should be.
Hmm.
Instead of her hour and 20-minute commute in traffic where everybody's grumpy and blowing horns and accidents everywhere all the time, you turn the TV on before she leaves and there's an accident here, another accident there. You're in the middle of that stop and go stuff for an hour and 20 minutes. You're frustrated by the time you get to work. Then you're in a little cubicle and then you spend your 8 hours there and then you fight your way home again.
Hmm.
It was
Yeah, we know
interesting.
that life.
Yeah, it was interesting because we were able to get up. We didn't have to get up at 4 in the morning. We got up later, went out on the back porch with a cup of tea with the dog, and watched and listened to the birds and looked, played, played with the animals and enjoyed nature and watched the sunrise. And then she had a 30-second commute up to where we had her office set up, and it worked. And then we had lunch together every day. And when a commute was when our thing was over, 30-second commute to the couch or to the back patio, and it was much more relaxing, much better for us. Luckily, she's still working from home 2 days a week, which is very beneficial. The state realized that they had more productive and happy people when
Hmm.
they allowed more balance between work and home.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, I think that the pendulum is swinging, and it's swinging a little bit wildly right now. So we went from being this sort of like automatons working in cubicles
Hmm.
to everybody on the loose, and now hopefully it's settling down a little bit, and maybe to a restored balance, because not everybody is going to quit everything and
Right.
go live in an RV or live on a boat. Not everybody is going to be able to work full time from home, and and to some degree we still really need community. I think
We
people
do.
really learned to appreciate community during the pandemic, and I think we will figure out what that means. And I think people were really questioning everything. So I do think that we'll settle into some kind of into some kind of balance, because you can't have the whole world going haywire at the same time, and you can't have everybody working in a cubicle. Like, neither of those
Yeah.
are realistic scenarios.
Oh, there were some corporations I know, that some very large corporations that actually were going. We need to get back to normal, and they had a discussion that I was part of actually during this little conference thing, and we said, what, why isn't this normal? Why isn't a
So that's a
hybrid
really
schedule
that's
normal?
yes, that is such a good question to ask. What is normal? And normal simply means this is the norm. This is the
Yeah.
average. This is the mean that we have. My kids use the word normal in a very derogatory manner. Like, if they say that someone is normal, if I say, "Hey, oh, we met those new people. What do you think?" And if they say, "Oh, they're normal," that means nothing good. That means nothing good. Like, they would take weird over normal any day.
It's funny.
So we get to decide what normal is. Why isn't kindness normal? Why
Yeah.
isn't raising your children normal? Why isn't homeschooling normal? Why isn't travel normal? I mean, I'm I'm able to talk about this because I am in a place of privilege where we've been
Right.
able to do this. Not everyone is able to do this. We've seen what life looks like in lots of places. We've seen abject poverty. I mean, what we call poverty here. I'm not saying there aren't poor people in
Right.
the United States, but I've seen poverty that makes poor people here look wealthy. And you realize that what wealth gives you is choices and options, and that there are people who haul wood every single day. They go into the forest and they haul wood. We've seen these little Mayan ladies in Guatemala gathering wood so that they could go home and cook their supper over a fire. I mean, like, nothing has changed in thousands and thousands of years. And so I don't take these choices that we've made lightly. They are a huge privilege. And we try not to waste that either, because I do believe that if you've
Yeah.
been, to whom more is given, more will be expected. And so I am expected to give something back because I have been given so much.
Well, that's a positive thing. How do you think spirituality pertains to all of this? Your journey, what you've experienced, what you just said, which is profound. As a police officer, I saw the worst of the worst, even the best people at their worst. I have been into poverty sections. I've not been in some of the ones that you have said, but I have been in very detrimental, both dysfunctional family perspective and poverty from our perspective, from what we know. Um, and it gave me a new, different perspective on life just within those experiences. How does spirituality play into all of this for you?
So it plays a critical part. It's not just a daily practice. I mean, I do get up every morning and I do pray, and I'm reading through the Bible in a year. Last year I read War and Peace. This year I'm tearing through the Bible one chapter at a time. So it's a daily practice. It's something that's a part of my everyday life. If I'm struggling with something, I ask for help. I surrender things. I listen to that voice when God asks me to do something. I go do it. We try to be generous with not just our time and our energy. That's a really important way to be generous. And in the bigger picture, I think when you see things, it's hard not to give up hope. It's hard when we have a family member that we love very much, and she's very, very ill and is not likely to make it. And it's hard not to give up hope when you see horrific things. It's hard not to give up hope when you see the earth being destroyed, or when you see abject poverty or corruption. And I think that my faith helps me not give up hope. On humanity as a whole, I kind of am pretty skeptical. I've become kind of a cynic. But on an individual person to person basis, I always hope for and look for the best in someone, and would hope that I would be able to bring out the best in someone, whether that's my kids or someone that I meet, or strangers, friends, family. I would hope that I would be able to give love and receive love, which I kind of generally view as the goal of humanity. That if you are raising children, you're raising them to feel loved and to be able to give love in return. And if you can keep your mind focused with faith and hope and love, then some of all of the really hard and horrific stuff fades into the background. It's still there, but it isn't your focus. So I guess my faith, my belief in God, my belief that He loves me, that I'm here for a reason, it brings me so much peace in the middle of hardship and chaos.
That's a good positive thing. I think that we all have to reflect upon where we stand within that arena and really understand that. Again, like you said earlier, we're part of a speck on a speck on another speck in the middle of all this huge, wide universe of opportunity. And um,
Yeah, but in all of that, we're not alone. Like,
so we're
how
not alone.
amazing is that? How amazing is that you could be basically invisible? Like, if you zoom out enough, we are invisible, and yet someone calls our name. That's amazing to
100%.
me.
And that's what started you on your journey, which is like fantastic. Let's talk a
That's
little
right.
bit more about how to get a hold of somebody who wants to do the same thing that you did, that maybe wants to take that leap, wants to pursue their dream, wants to move forward in a different, maybe a unique way, wants to understand more spirituality. You've got two things. You've got a book, and then you've got a blog that you do, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. And the book, I would say, is not it's not a recipe for how to go sailing with your family. It's probably the opposite. Probably half the people who read it would be like, I am never ever going to step foot on a boat with my kids. But I would say that it is full of life lessons that are applicable to people who might never go sailing. That each chapter is named for a sailing analogy that we use all the time. I'm trying to think, like ships passing in the night is a chapter about friendship. Close quarters is a chapter about what it means to live in close proximity to your family, but it also is about sort of a bigger life lesson. Close quarters, for example, would be about how to get along with people that you're with all the time, and everybody can relate to that, not just people who literally have a cabin next to each other on a tiny boat in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, it would be difficult I'm going to leave and take a break here, and you can't just step off the boat.
That's right. You have to develop coping mechanisms. And maybe that's how, Jane and I have stayed married so long. We have this shared dream that we have pursued together, and it took all of our energy and time and love and money to keep it going, and we take really good care of it because that foundation that we have in our relationship makes everything else work. And a boat is kind of an environment that will make or break you. And thank God it made us, because we've seen lots of single sailors, and it, it could have gone the other
Can't go
way.
any other way. I forgot to ask, how does somebody find you?
Oh, excellent. You can find me on the blog at take2sailing.com. And we've been blogging since 2008. Not just me, but my whole family has written for that blog. And any photo that you click in a blog post will take you to our Flickr page, and you can look through the photos. And then I'm on Facebook as myself, and also Take to Sailing. And you can also read my book, Leaving the Safe Harbor: The Risks and Rewards of Raising a Family on a Boat.
Very
And
good.
that's available wherever books are sold. It's available at Amazon.
And Take to Sailing is spelled out TAKETWO, and sailing SAILING. And I'll make sure that all that gets into the show notes as well, so that everybody has a unique way to click right on it and go right to where they need to go. Tanya, thank you very much for spending the time with me. I know that we had some technical difficulties when we tried to have a conversation before, but it wasn't meant to be at that time, and it was now.
That's right. And I was thinking about what we talked about at the end of our conversation that didn't work out, about one more thing before you go. And I was thinking about my mother-in-law, who, she's a sailor too, and she's really, really sick, and it's really hard to watch her suffering. And I thought, if I could tell her one more thing before I go, what would it be? And all week I couldn't think of a single thing. And I realized that if you have lived your life well, and if you've left nothing unsaid, and if you have spoken words of love to the people that you care for, then there's nothing left unsaid. And you're, in a sense, prepared. At any moment, you could be snatched from this earth and your time could be up. And that is what it means to live a good life and to live without regret, is that, if I died tomorrow, I will have died content. And besides telling her that I love her, and holding her hand to the next leg of her journey, there's nothing left unsaid. So I don't actually have any more things to say before I go.
I was going to ask you if you have any words of wisdom, but in a sense, you just said that life can change in an instant, and make sure that you have those discussions throughout your relationship with somebody, so that there is something that left unsaid. And that's profound. So thank you very much for sharing that with me. It makes me feel good.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing your journey with me today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your profound experience that set you on this journey of life and sharing. And I look forward to having a conversation with you down the road.
Well, thank you for asking the deep questions and talking about the things that really matter.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us, as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.